Hi, welcome back. It's Abby Steele. Let's get stuck straight in and have a walkthrough of the reading framework, Teaching the Foundations of Literacy, Section 2, Language Comprehension. Section 2, Language Comprehension, Developing Talk. Young children typically gain several new words a day, acquiring vocabulary at an astonishing rate. Yet by the time they start school, some children will have heard millions more words than others. The number of words a child has heard and can speak by the age of 3 is a predictor of later language development, so these early vocabulary gains are critically important. A language-rich environment is one in which adults talk with children throughout the day. The more children take part in conversations, the more they will understand once they can read, and the more vocabulary and ideas they will have to draw on when they can write. Spoken language runs through the National Curriculum Programmes for Study for English and all 7 areas of learning and development in the revised Early Years Foundation Stage Statutory Framework. Back and forth talk across the curriculum. Underpinning the reforms to the Early Years Foundation Stage is the aim of reducing the language gap between children from language-rich homes and others. The progress of these children depends on adults engaging them in high-quality dialogue and direct teaching so that they can articulate what they know and understand, develop their knowledge across all areas of learning using the vocabulary they need to support learning. Critical to this are children's back and forth interactions with adults. These form the foundations for language and cognitive development. The number and quality of the conversations they have with adults and peers throughout the day in a language-rich environment is crucial. These back and forth interactions involve the adult in thinking out loud, modelling new language for children, paying close attention to what the children say, rephrasing and extending what the children say, validating the children's attempts at using new vocabulary and grammar by rephrasing what children say if necessary, asking closed and open questions, answering the children's questions, explaining why things happen, deliberately connecting current and past events, do you remember when, providing models of accurate grammar, extending children's vocabulary and explaining new words, connecting one idea or action to another, helping children to articulate ideas in well-formed sentences. To develop and extend children's language takes careful, deliberate planning in each area of learning, with opportunities built in for plenty of repetition. What do we want children to know and think about? What vocabulary is associated with this knowledge and thinking? How can we engage the children in back and forth talk that supports their knowledge and thinking? What photos could we take that would reinforce the vocabulary and language after an activity or visit? Which books could be read aloud and shared before and afterwards? Which songs might introduce or reinforce the vocabulary? For example, a class visit to a fire station might generate a range of vocabulary related to its different aspects, the semantic field or word field, such as the following. Fire. Blaze, flames, heat, smoke, plumes, extinguish. Emergency. Emergency, accident, harm, dangerous, trapped, blue light, siren. Safety and rescue. Protect, shield, escape, first aid, rescue, save, tackle. Protective clothing. Visor, helmet, gloves, soles, material. Properties of materials. Transparent, see-through, fire-resistant, strong, tough, unbreakable, fireproof, protective, waterproof. Equipment, fire engine, truck, reel, hose, ladder, turntable, water, cutters, axe, air tanks, thermal imaging camera, torch. Personal characteristics, brave, courageous, speedy, quick thinking, daring, heroic. Following up the visit in the classroom, adults can reinforce the language and vocabulary, talking about the photographs taken on the visit, or recalling and naming specific features of the firefighter's clothes or the fire engine. For example, do you remember why the firefighters have to wear special gloves? Yes, to keep their hands cool and protect them from the heat. What did their gloves look like? That's right, that's a good word. They did look stiff, but actually they said they were very comfortable. Do you remember how they could bend their fingers easily in them? They could hold even the tiniest objects when they were wearing them. Once it has been introduced, opportunities arise to repeat and consolidate the vocabulary in different contexts, such as when describing the characteristics of a hero or heroine or exploring the properties of materials. The table above focuses on extending vocabulary related to a fire station visit. To give another example, on a woodland walk, adults might select from some of the following adjectives to focus on in back and forth talk with children: rough, bumpy, narrow, wide, curved, symmetrical, mottled, speckled, spiky, sharp, thorny, pointed, delicate, young. However, they might also make sure they use and reinforce specific prepositions, such as between, underneath, up, down, inside, around, and over. For example, the oak tree bark has bumps like long fingers. Can you feel the deep lines between each bump? What does the acorn feel like? Yes, it is smooth, but it's rough underneath. Lift the log up gently. What can you see underneath it? Can you see anything inside it? Put it down very gently. Look, Harry is wrapping his arms around the huge trunk. Let's climb over this big log. Who is going to climb over it first? Later, by making a book from the photographs taken on the walk, teachers can revisit the language used and the children can learn to describe the events in greater detail on each reading. What did we do? What can you see in this photo? Do you remember when we all climbed over the big log? And here's Mirage running his fingers across the rough bark. Look, you can see that the large bumps had even more tiny bumps on them. The early learning goal, the natural world, refers explicitly to children drawing on their experiences and what has been read in class. More generally, sharing and discussing pictures in non-fiction books offers opportunities to broaden children's experiences beyond the immediate and the local. For example, books about space, other countries, animals, exploration, and courageous people from a range of occupations and ethnic backgrounds are rich sources of vocabulary and knowledge. As well as building important knowledge, this extends their familiarity with words that support understanding across domains. Enriching and widening children's vocabulary will support later reading comprehension. Extending children's familiarity with words across domains is particularly important for children from disadvantaged backgrounds who might not otherwise meet such vocabulary. Listening. Children need to be taught when to listen, to know what good listening looks like, and they need praise. Ways of supporting good listening include deciding on a signal to alert children to listen, showing children what good listening looks like through the teacher's own behaviour. Oh, wait a minute, I need to listen carefully. Let's be quiet so I can concentrate on what you're saying. Reinforcing and praising good listening with examples. I could tell you were going to say something interesting. I could see you were listening carefully and concentrating. You must have listened carefully during assembly yesterday to have remembered that. Well done for telling everyone what your partner just shared with you. Good listening. Well done for using that special word from the story yesterday. I'm pleased you listened hard. Talking with a partner and giving feedback. Teachers need to help children articulate their ideas in well-formed sentences by scaffolding, extending, and developing their ideas. They all need to practice their skills of listening to, talking with a partner, and giving feedback to the group. Learning the routines of back and forth talk is particularly important for children who have not experienced such talk before they came to school. Pairing children with their partners, ready for responding together, encourages them to discuss a question, problem, or idea and agree on their joint response. Because their answer belongs to both of them and they will have practiced it first, they grow in confidence when asked to respond in front of others. The teacher can observe the pairs talking and select those with helpful answers to develop the discussion. If the teacher chooses which pair feeds back to the group, rather than responding only to pairs who might raise their hands, this can help to make sure that all the pairs are ready to contribute. If children think they might not be selected, they might not engage fully. By establishing strong routines for responding to questions and suggestions, children will be more likely to pay attention because they know they will be expected to respond. The teacher will know what they have understood because they will have listened carefully to what the children have been saying and will have heard any misconceptions. The following are suggestions for managing effective pair work. Guidance for managing talk in pairs. Sequence: ask a question. Guidance: ask questions about what happened before asking questions about why. Ask children to talk with the partners. Listen carefully to identify which pairs might give feedback later and to pinpoint misconceptions. Take feedback from one or two pairs. Ask one partner to feedback to the group. Choose a different partner each time. Repeat what children say and/or rephrase their response. Make sure that all children know what was said. Take the opportunity to model correct grammar. Extend children's ideas. Think aloud as you extend the idea so the discussion moves forwards. Ask the children to repeat some sentences chorally. As you extend the sentence, gradually add more detail and ask them to repeat the sentence at each step in unison. Ask children sometimes to build on the ideas of others. Repeat the child's idea and ask partners to turn to each other again to discuss the idea. Model accurate grammar, particularly irregular past tenses and plurals. Avoid correcting children in a way that makes them feel they have said something wrong. Model a correct response rather than asking them to repeat the correction. Speech, language and communication needs. For children who have speech, language and communication needs, SLCN, the strategies already described should be even more focused. In particular, noise should be reduced where possible and the children seated where they have the best chance of hearing and paying attention. Reducing noise is important for all children. Help is available for schools to identify and support children who have speech, language and communication needs. Practices that can reduce interaction with children. Collecting evidence. Teachers do not have to collect and record evidence of children's achievement for the early years foundation stage profile. Ofsted reported in 2017 that some leaders and staff during the course of its survey were spending teaching time on collecting and recording children's achievements, often through photographs, captions and written notes. Inspectors found that with the exception of literacy and numeracy, many teachers were devising tasks simply to tick off and record elements of the early learning goals, rather than developing a proper plan that focused on progression in learning. Observation puts the adult in a state of judgment rather than interaction. Every moment spent in observing, recording, collecting and compiling evidence takes teachers' time away from teaching, including talking. Hands up. Asking children to respond to hands up is a common part of schools' teaching, but it can cut down opportunities for learning and talk. It might be beneficial to reflect on hands up because children from families who are accustomed to talking already have the confidence and oral skills to grasp opportunities to speak and will engage themselves readily in questions and answers. Other children, however, might hold back from responding, including shy ones, those who are new to learning English, and those whose oral skills are less well developed. As a result, the language gap widens further. If 6 children raise their hands and only 1 is chosen to answer, the other 5 are excluded, even if they had something worthwhile to say, while 24 further children may stay silent altogether. Noisy environments. When children are learning to read and write, a noisy environment makes it difficult for them to hear what the teacher and other children are saying, particularly for those who have hearing difficulties or impairments, those with speech, language and communication needs, and those who find it difficult to pay attention. If these children cannot hear clearly, their chances of responding are immediately limited. Calm classrooms give them the best chance to interact and make progress in reading and writing. So guys, I have kind of mixed feelings about this section too. I can see how some people are finding this tone really patronising. It's kind of really stating the obvious. And but I try to, always be positive and always sit on the fence and see things from different people's point of view. I do know that from my experience in working across the country in many, many schools, that some teachers are more natural in the way that they, for example, develop children's talk and hold interactions with them, and other teachers are just less natural at that, or they take a little while to develop that and discover how to do that as they, progress from being a brand new teacher. And that was probably me. I think as a new teacher, I was very kind of, like I've said before, thrown in at the deep end, not very sure. So I tried to think that actually, yeah, this could be really, really helpful guidance for people who are unsure, and it really kind of makes it very clear. But I don't know how I feel about such specifics in a DFE document. I feel like some of these things are perhaps a little step too far, would perhaps be better placed in a book that a consultant or an educationalist has written, the kind of book that you might go and get to learn about the technique. But yeah, in a DFE document, I'm not too sure. It's not sitting too comfortably. For example, things like hands up. Well, yep, hands up, there's a good point there. But equally, I distinctly remember being that child in school who was absolutely mortified if I was asked to contribute. For me, I was a very, very shy child, really shy. And if the teacher didn't do hands up, oh gosh, that was really stressful for me. I remember literally feeling that stress of thinking, oh my goodness, they might pick me. And if they pick me, it's just going to be the worst thing in the world. I just don't want to have to interact in that way. So I think that the danger is that this document is perhaps not being open to other ideas and possibilities. However, being positive again, I do like that this document has these audits in. So actually, what you need to think about with this document is that it gives you food for thought. It makes you reflect on your practice. It's not, I wouldn't take it that it has all the answers or that it's perfect, but it definitely makes you reflect. And then you can use these audits, literally use the pages. They've got spaces there for you that you can make notes and you can sort of think about what you do. So in this audit for language comprehension, we've got some statements. A clearly defined curriculum extends children's language and vocabulary in each of the early years foundation stage areas of learning and in year 1 for each subject. Children are taught routines for back and forth talk. Activities are used effectively to develop children's language. Non-fiction books related to experiences and activities are read with children and made available for them to share at school and home. Effective procedures identify and support children with speech, language and communication needs. Teachers are aware of practices that could reduce interactions with children. So definitely worth thinking about. Okay, next little part is thinking about story times. Choosing books to read aloud to children. The decisions we make about how we educate our children are rooted in our beliefs and attitudes. The challenge is to reflect them in the stories and non-fiction children listen to, and later in what they read for themselves. Literature is probably the most powerful medium through which children have a chance to inhabit the lives of those who are like them. All children need to imagine themselves as the main protagonists in a story, celebrating a birthday, going shopping, being ill, having a tantrum, having their hair cut, worrying about a new sibling, being the superhero, going camping, visiting the seaside, and having adventures. Children also need to learn about the lives of those whose experiences and perspectives differ from their own. Choosing stories and non-fiction that explore such differences begins to break down a sense of otherness that often leads to division and prejudice. The challenge is to make sure that the right books support all children to thrive, whatever their background. Teachers need to choose those that will engage all of them emotionally. As Marianne Wolf wrote, we know that emotional engagement is the tipping point between leaping into the reading life or remaining in a childhood bog where reading is endured only as a means to other ends. Teachers are the best people to promote a love of reading because children, particularly young children, care what their teachers think about the stories they read aloud. If teachers show they love the story, the children are likely to respond in the same way. However, this does not mean that teachers should choose only the books they loved as children. These are suggested questions to help choose suitable books for reading aloud. A single book is unlikely to meet all the criteria below, although a full selection should do so. So, choosing books. Does the book elicit a strong response? Curiosity, anger, excitement, laughter, empathy. Have a strong narrative that will sustain multiple readings. Extend children's vocabulary. Have illustrations which are engaging and reflect children from all backgrounds and cultures. Help children connect with who they are. Help children to understand the lives of people whose experiences and perspectives may be different from their own. Core read aloud stories and non-fiction. Use choosing books above as a guide. Identify a core set of stories for each year group. Consider a range of stories set in the UK and around the world, both traditional and modern, as well as non-fiction. Refresh the list regularly, at least once a year, as new books are published and new teachers arrive, to avoid its being set in stone. Encourage teachers to familiarise themselves with the stories their classes will know from previous years. Supplement the core read aloud stories with others of the teacher's choice. Consider sharing the list with parents and explaining its purpose so they could buy or borrow the books. Living the story. Everybody loves a good story. Even small children who have difficulty focusing in class will sit with rapt attention in the presence of a good storyteller. But stories are not just fun, they are important cognitive consequences of the story format. Our minds treat stories differently than other types of material. People find stories interesting, easy to understand, and easy to remember. When teachers read aloud to a class, they try to replicate for children what it feels like to have someone's undivided attention while sharing a story. This is why reading aloud should be a priority. Thriving on repetition. It's not just the number of different stories children listen to that matters. On each rereading, their familiarity with a story deepens, and with that comes a greater emotional engagement. Woolf quotes the writer Anne Fadiman when she reflects on what rereading brings. The former, reading, had more velocity. The latter had more depth. When children ask for a story to be reread, in effect, they are asking for another chance to explore the language, the characters and their feelings, and to relive the emotions they felt on the first reading. They hear the same words read in the same way and gain a sense of comfort in knowing what follows. They wait for their favourite bits, ready to join in or ready to be scared, even when they already know what happens. Their attachment to the story equips them to retell it, and when they've learnt to read, encourages them to read it for themselves. Preparation and practice. The main aim of storytelling is to breathe life into the words, capturing children's attention rather than simply entertaining them. Reading aloud therefore requires preparation. How to emphasise particular words, phrases and sentences needs planning so that the children understand the story as a whole. Rehearsal and frequent practice also improve the storyteller's confidence. Consider the following in preparing a reading: voice or voices, pauses, word meanings, asides, memorable words and phrases. See Appendix 3 for teachers preparing to read a story, in which contains further guidance on preparation. Filming some reading aloud can be helpful because teachers are often their own best critics. First and subsequent readings. Before a first reading starts, the teacher can build up children's anticipation during the day. I've got a new story by Elizabeth Laird. It's called Grobble Chops. I'm really looking forward to reading it with you. Let's clear up a bit earlier today so I've got time to read the new story. Once the children have been told the name of the author and the title and the story has been introduced, the reading should start. This is a story about Amir, whose dad gives him advice on how to deal with a monster under his bed. The first reading should be left to weave its own magic, with no questions, no explanations, and no requests for the children to predict what might happen. On the second reading, asides, voices and actions can explain the meanings of new words in context. If the story is read aloud in a similar way each time, the children can gradually join in with particular words and phrases and even respect the pauses. When children know the story well, dramatising the story can be motivating once the children know it well, and it can hold their interest and focus. Dramatisation of stories is unique in that it requires the basic teaching skills of listening, observing closely, and harnessing the imagination of everyone in exploring new ideas. Roleplay can also help children to reflect on how a character might think, feel, and behave at key moments, and explore motives and intentions. Asking all the children to adopt the same role at the same time is an opportunity for everyone to participate. For example, saying, "Hello wolves, show me your paws, show me your twitching noses, show me your sharp pointy teeth," puts all of them quickly into role as the wolf, not just wondering about pretending to be one, which might be the case with simply saying, "Imagine you are the wolf." The following questions for roleplay are designed to explore a character's motives. With minor adaptations, they can be used for any story and directed to any character in it. Roleplay example questions, Little Red Riding Hood. "Okay, wolves, Little Red Riding Hood is coming towards you. What do you want? How will you get it? What are you thinking? How do you feel? What are your options? What will you do? What will you say?" Using stories and rhymes to develop vocabulary and language. Stories are a rich source of language, vocabulary and syntax. Good writers know how to entice young children into their texts. Through listening to repeated readings and talking about what they have heard, the children have multiple exposures to vocabulary and the language of stories. Continued talk about words, as well as opportunities to use them, helps children to absorb the language. Teachers can also emphasize memorable words and phrases. Through stories, children encounter vocabulary that they are unlikely to hear in everyday conversation, but will come across in writing once they can read for themselves. Isabel Beck has called such vocabulary second-tier words. All the following vocabulary, for example, occurs in a single picture book: bellowed, startled, barged, sneaked, grinned, dreadful, stomped, refused. Similarly, another story used all the following: explore, discovered, wondered, enormous, barely, unexpected, shrink, tumbled. A robust approach to vocabulary involves directly explaining the meaning of words, along with thought-provoking, playful, and interactive follow-up. Teachers can explore these words and explain them, not just in the context of the story, but also as children might use or hear them in their own lives, as in these examples of startled, barge, and bellowed. Everyone was startled when the balloon popped at her party. Tanim was startled by the lion's roar at the zoo. It is always startling when the fire alarm rings in school. Don't barge past your sister, please. There are plenty of biscuits. Don't barge past those younger children, please. My mum bellowed when she saw the paint on the carpet. The team bellowed when Jodie deliberately pushed Anya over. Mr. Banks bellowed at the children when they ran next to the swimming pool. Book corners. The books themselves are the most important aspect of any book corner. It should be the words of the stories and not the props that transport children to different worlds: the mysterious forest, the dark and dripping cave, the moated castle. Well-chosen books should capture children's imagination to such an extent that they become unaware of whether they are sitting on a beanbag, an ordinary classroom chair, or a bench in the book corner. Time might therefore be better spent on selecting, displaying, and promoting the books in the book corner than on decorating it. Really interesting. I'm trying to read and not do too much commentary, but this one I have a really good example of. I used to say this to schools a lot, actually. Don't make your book corners overly fancy. You really need to focus on the books. And actually, my thinking on that was challenged by a few different examples of teachers and schools where they actually said to me, we totally get what you're saying, but actually we have found in our experience that for our children, to get them to engage and interact with the book corner, we found that by dressing it up and making a bit of a sort of, making an actual mysterious forest or a moated castle, it is the hook that gets them in. And once they're in and they're engaging with the books, yes, the books take the lead. So I think, again, it's take it with a pinch of salt, isn't it? It's a really good, important message that, yes, you don't need to spend hours on making fancy book corners. The books are the important bit. But equally, you've got to put it in context and you've got to make it work for you. And you might be somebody who really enjoys dressing that book corner. That's your thing that you love doing and your children really enjoy it. So I think you need to know that it's absolutely fine to do that if you still want to. Anyway, I continue. Ideally, every book corner should be a mini library, a place for children to browse the best books, revisit the ones that the teacher has read to them, and borrow books to read or retell at home. Every child should be able to spend time in their book corner. Children will want to share books with others, especially if they are books in common that they know their friends have heard before. They will also be interested to look at books which feature well-known fictional characters or are new and tempting. Every book in a book corner should be worth reading aloud. The focus should always be on what would make the biggest difference to children's reading habits, including not displaying too many books at once, refreshing the display, making the books attractive and easy for children to find. The more choice that is presented, the less children are likely to engage. Bookshops, for instance, reduce the number of books on display by using outward-facing shelves and tables so customers can find new books easily. They also refresh their displays to highlight topics, titles or authors they hope will attract customers. Teachers might consider displaying only the books that have been read aloud to children, such as 30 or 40 storybooks. Some children in the class will only be able to retell the story. Others will be able to reread it for themselves. Different books can be introduced gradually, including those the children will have heard during story time. Ideally, books the children have listened to recently should be displayed at their eye level on outward-facing shelves. At the start of the school year, it is also worth including around 20 of the children's favourites from the previous year. These can occupy lower shelves or boxes. Books that have been previously read could be stored in extra boxes for children to read and retell again at school and at home. Children could be involved in returning books to the central library or other area so that they can see that their book corner is being refreshed and replenished. A book that is dull and dog-eared should be removed unless it is particularly well loved. The decodable books, later in section 3, matched to the school's phonic programme are best stored separately so that teachers can select from them, both for children's reading in class and to take home. Reading with children at home. Children benefit hugely from listening to family members reading aloud to them. Teachers might consider making a film for parents to illustrate the benefits of sharing and talking about stories aloud and how teachers read stories aloud to their own class. And here we've got the audit now for the storytime section. And I enjoyed most of the storytime section, actually. The bit that I felt a little bit uncomfortable about, that I know other people have been saying they feel uncomfortable about, is the level of detail that the document goes into when talking about preparing for a story reading. It goes into quite a lot of detail that could be perceived as quite patronising. Although, seeing it from both sides, I've met many a teacher, many an adult who isn't particularly a natural story reader or, feels a bit uncomfortable reading a story. But I don't think that's necessarily about preparing for the reading. I think it's practice. I think it's just getting stuck in and practicing and actually observing each other. So for me, adults observing other adults reading stories aloud to children, that's like by far the best way to learn how to become a better storyteller, actually. Okay, the audit, storytime audit. Here are your statements to think about. Food for thought. The daily time for stories is a priority. Teachers prepare the story reading so they can capture children's attention. Extra small group story times are timetabled for children with speech, language and communication needs. Staff have a wide knowledge of traditional and contemporary children's literature. High quality stories to read aloud to children, including traditional and modern stories, are organised, listed and shared. In stories and other books, children encounter others whose experiences and perspectives are both similar to and different from their own. Teachers reread stories and talk with children about them to build familiarity and understanding. Some stories are dramatised with children when they know the story well. Second-tier vocabulary is explored in wider contexts once children know a story well. Books are made available for parents to share with their children at home. Teachers explain to parents the benefits of reading aloud at home. And book corners are appealing to children and uncluttered. Oh, and another one here. Children have time to browse and reread or retell stories that have been read to them. So a little bit just to finish off section 2 about poetry and rhymes. Through enjoying rhymes, poems and songs, and reciting poems or parts of longer poems together as a class, teachers can build children's strong emotional connection to language. Poetry in language-rich classrooms builds shared memories for all children. The predictability of rhymes in poems and songs also helps children to memorise and reuse newly acquired words and phrases. Learning poetry and songs using call and response allows children to join in gradually. Each repetition strengthens their vocabulary, embedding new words. Word knowledge exists on a continuum. As each word is acquired in the young child's lexicon, it moves from the barest familiarity to an in-depth knowledge of that word with all manner of associations and contexts. As the children say each word of a poem, the cadence, the cadence of the lines helps to convey the meaning and the mood. See, I'm learning my own new vocabulary in the document. It's when you read out loud, isn't it? So you think, oh, how do I pronounce that? Cadence. Okay. Children pick up the rhythm and by speaking more slowly gain awareness and control of their voices. Learning rhymes, poems and songs is an end in itself. However, learning poems, including traditional nursery rhymes such as Hickory Dickory Dock, Little Jack Horner and Baa Baa Black Sheep, can also heighten children's awareness of the individual sounds within words through alliteration, assonance and rhyme. For instance, because rhymes share the same end sound, they alert children to the contrast of the phonemes at the start of each word, as well as the repeated phonemes at the end, as in dock clock, horner corner and incy wincy. Choosing poems. Teachers should identify a core set of poems for each year group, including rhyming poems, poems where alliteration is a strong feature, word games, traditional songs and rhymes, nonsense rhymes, and poems that are particularly rhythmical. Those chosen should be able to withstand a lot of repetition, elicit a strong response, and extend children's vocabulary in different areas of learning. And a little poetry audit with 2 statements. The daily poetry, rhyme and singing session is a priority. Poems, rhymes and songs for each year group are listed. There we are, and that's the end of section 2. Thanks for sticking with me. It was good to spend a little bit of time on it. Quite nice because I know that the whole document has a lot of phonics in it. I think it's section 3 is going to go on to look at phonics. I feel like there's a bit of a balance, there's a bit of an acknowledgement that actually, stories are so important and book corners are important and talk is important and poetry is important. So it's nice to have a little bit more of a well-rounded approach. Anyway, go and grab yourself a cup of tea. You deserve it if you didn't already have one while you were listening. And I look forward to you joining me for section 3.